All right, cyber traders, welcome on back here for another fantastic edition of our Traders Talk workshop here this Tuesday, July 19th, shortly after 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Great to see all of us live inside the CyberGroup room. Give me a very quick moment here as I readjust my headset action. Great to see all of us back on social media action. I'm doing this on a surprise pop-up webinar on YouTube right now. So great to see all of us at least on YouTube today, joining us back for our exclusive Traders Talk workshop. We normally conduct this workshop live inside the CyberGroup trading room. Today, we're just doing it on YouTube as well, simulcast. So great to see all of us collectively. And with that, we are good to go. I just had to make sure that I was squared away with the recording. Actually, I'm realizing right now that I'm all right. I'll just pull it from YouTube either way. It's actually a blessing in disguise that we're doing this on YouTube right now with that in mind. Perfect. All right. So for Egan, for Jeffrey, for Pedro, for Ray, I should say Pete there, not Pedro. For Brian, for Jim, for Bill, Ron, Bruce, and Chris, and all of us live inside the trading room. Welcome on back for our Traders Talk workshop. This is a workshop where we have as good of a chance as any to break down the X's and O's as to knowing why a stock made the move that it made, right? Like, I always like to say this just comedically in class at times. You have to put yourself in the shoes, as a new trader at least, you have to put yourself in the shoes of like a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. You always have to ask why. Why did this stock make the move that it made? It popped up early in pre-market, but how does it make the exact move that it's making right now? And more importantly, of course, taking yourself out of the shoes of a 5 or 6-year-old and putting yourself in the shoes of, a professional trader. How could I be able to anticipate that move going forward? Why is this making the move that it's making? And how could we anticipate this move going forward on other stocks? So with that, that's where we'll be able to break down the SIDU at least early on this morning. It was a stock that was on the top of our morning watch list here heading into the market open. For any one of us just joining us now on YouTube Live, I should say, hey, coming off the morning meeting with Fausto, he ended up posting that right on the morning watch list. So give me a quick moment. I'll repost that list for anyone joining us late. Not too many stocks on the CTU morning watch list here heading into the market open. We had the SIDU, which is obviously on the screen here and making a big pop right now. STIM, USEA, a couple more name brand stocks, Shopify, and then I actually slipped to him the AMC trade before my internet ended up cutting out briefly. How about that? So, hey, SIDU ended up making a huge pop here, but we had called it out early on. So, how could we have anticipated the bounce from roughly around that 320 area, bottomed out at 316? Was there anything that could have led us to anticipate that exact bounce? Because truth be told, this morning, I focused on the Neo trade, which is one of my bread and butter. I focused on AMC, Jeffrey. There we go. I focused on AMC heading into the market open today with it being on our watch list. And I personally followed the STIM. So I actually ended up getting a short on the STIM trade, which we'll look to cover here in just a bit. Quick question before we cover this stock, the SIDU, from one of our members on YouTube joining us here for this workshop. Gosu Trader, he's asking, you don't use VWAP? We absolutely use VWAP. In fact, that's what led me to take one of the trades I took here today on the STIM. So we'll cover that. We'll cover the SIDU here in just a bit. In fact, let me just show that here in just a moment by introducing level 4. So, of course, most of us here, if not have level 4, are familiar with it already to the point where, hey, we show it in our live workshops and classes all the time. So with this stock being on our, morning watch list, was there anything that was out here on level 4 as I, pull this up right now? Are there any dark orange or red lines that are going across the screen consistently, perhaps? Just one that's going across the screen from like 9 o'clock or 9:05 or maybe 9:10 all the way to the market open. Now, this might be a little tough to see just because, as I brought up a moment ago, my internet ended up cutting out just suddenly during the meeting. So I ended up having to reset some things. So that's why it looks a little funky with Bookmap. But if you could try your hardest here to see where the dark orange or red lines are that stretch mostly across the screen, mostly. So Pete says 380. I like that answer. 380 seems like it was there from like 9:10 in the morning all the way over. I like that. Now, here's the thing why I don't like the level itself. there's only about 4,400 shares there, Pete, right? So is that big of an iceberg? Not yet. I'd want to see a little bit more out of that level, but it's there since 910. It didn't get pulled, so I'll respect that part, right? That's what I was asking, and you would answer that. Well, I could also say like right around here, like right around 328 ish. I know it got quote unquote pulled here. I think that's when my internet ended up cutting out there, perhaps. But 328 ish could be a level when the market opens up. Well, we'll tend to see this fill in a lot more. So, how about this really quick before I even show Bookmap further and show you what the stock actually did? By the time the market opened up, where do we see the biggest orders going down this column? Going down this column here, COB, what price levels have the biggest numbers next to it, the biggest number of shares? And for Gosu, we'll look to check out APLN or that APLD actually rather in just a bit. We're going to just attend to this trade first and for all of us live inside the trading room here as well. So Pete and Charles say 350. Yeah, right there. You could see roughly around that 350 area. It's right at 350, but about 15,000 shares sitting on the ask right at 350. Well, hey, I mean, just for most stocks, right? Pretty much every stock, you should assume that if not at 50-cent levels, then simply at the whole numbers, that you're going to find big iceberg levels, especially the cheaper stocks like this. So, $3, $4 stocks like this, definitely you should assume that 350 is going to be a big level by the time the market opens. And this certainly just confirms it. Now, there is also volume at 360, 370, 380 is still there, but not as much. So obviously 350 is the bigger resistance first. Well, from there, do we have any support? Anything sticking out on the bid down below? Looking on that COB column as you go down, anything standing out? It might be tough to read with the lime green bars, right? But Bruce says 316, about 11,000 shares on the bid there. Some kind of lingering around 310, but yeah, 316, right? Now, I'm going to make this a lot easier on the eyes for us to see, but I wanted to show that first because, hey, by the time the market opens, it's all about just locating the bigger levels, the bigger icebergs out there. So for those that don't have Bookmap, well, hey, if you're just looking at the NASDAQ book viewer, if you're looking at the TradeStation matrix, which is level 3, it's all about just locating the bigger orders that are out there. So at 316, and I'll try and zoom in here and make it even easier to see. There's about 12,000 shares, 12,500 shares, this dark red line, right, at 316. There's also some volume, like I'd said, lingering around 310, 312, etc. But, nonetheless, it's pretty interesting because this trade ended up coming all the way down, bottomed out right around 316, and ended up beginning its squeeze from there, right? So it ended up approaching support, ended up pulling right down to it, and ended up, essentially holding right over it, making the move up from support. Now, from that point, though, as I look to kind of just show Bookmap, I know it might be a little hard to read at first, but I'm doing this to, just kind of make a point because, well, actually, Bookmap is relatively easy to read if you're just focused on the red lines, right? That's how I normally teach it. So we're normally conditioned to just focus on that. That's why I'm throwing this little twist in here, just kind of making it a little bit tougher to read, but it's all a matter of focusing it on the numbers. And also now as well, we'll focus on these two columns here, CVP and CVP delta. So as this looks to begin to bounce, let me ask you, looking more on the far right column, this right here, where it says CVP delta, Janice, what price levels have the largest green bars to it? 340, right, from Pete and Janice. Yeah, I'd say so. 340, and then let's go one more. We'll go, one or two more. Say right here, right? Basically at 334, we'll call this 334, 334, and 340. What that represents right there from Bookmap is that we have a lot more volume filled at the ask there compared to the bid, meaning that there's a lot more buying, a lot more green right on the tape. Green on time in sales equates to quote unquote buying. So it's to say, well, the more times that this could needle its head up top on this resistance here at 334, well, I'd like to anticipate that it can make a pop up. And not only do we have 340 here as resistance next, we also got the VWAP line in white, which might be a little tough to see there. We have an order at 342, 350. This is a tough stock to try and anticipate the real breakout on, because this stock was just in consolidation for a lot longer than we would normally want to see some stocks consolidate for. So, this took about 20, 25 minutes. And normally when the market opens up, we have like 55 minutes, just about. You wait the first 3 to 5 minutes upon the market open. All right, you wait. But from there up until 10:30, when we know that's normally quote unquote reversal time, well, hey, that's our prime time. This is just chopping around during our prime time. So the more it does that, is it guaranteed to run? No, nothing's guaranteed, first off, right? But even more so with this taking its sweet time. So I want to play this level by level, essentially, meaning that, hey, if it blasts above 334 here, as it seemed to have, started to, then let's see it hold support there. Then when it begins to blast over 340 and the VWAP line here, and maybe this level at 342, let's see it hold support there, right? And again, I'm going to go back on that just so you folks can kind of get a better eye. Notice just on the far right column, as I initially brought up, we have a lot more green, we'll call it, a lot more buying, perhaps at 337, we'll call that 340. I'm sorry. Right there. That's how I had the picture. 334 at first, then from there 340. So the more times it needles its head at 334 here as it begins to consolidate and slowly move up, you're thinking the more it does that, well, it should pop it. And once it pops it, well, once a resistance level gets broken through for Janice and Pete and Chris and Bill and Chuck and all of us here live, when a stock breaks resistance and it runs off it, what should we expect that resistance to initially become? Initially, just like we talked about in class. Now, this is at 9:50 Eastern time. I'm going to peel this back just so you can have a better glimpse on the chart here for right now, the regular chart. Now, obviously, this is still moving right now. It looks like it just broke over resistance at 4 here. So we'll cover this trade just as it most recently ended up making a move. But pretty interesting where this ended up initially peeking its head right above 334 here. Ended up holding support from there, didn't it? From there, it continued to make its push. So nice little run initially. Well, it ended up coming down, and that's where I would normally expect to see the stock just continue to consolidate and dump off. So, I didn't trade the stock at all today, and after the initial run up, I just didn't even bother with it after. So, personally, I took my eyes off it. But from there, one level that you can at least see where it ended up very cleanly, at least holding back under, and by the time it broke back through it on the way up, it sure led to a nice run. That was right off of that 334 level, right? That's pretty interesting to see. Well, overall, we ended up having resistance at 350. We said there was an iceberg at 350 on the ask just earlier, and I'll show you that once again. Right, we ended up seeing a resistance from 350 from the market open. A lot of us had mentioned that in the chat board just, when I had first asked that. It was there. So that's our, top line of resistance, at least throughout this kind of consolidation. So over time, it ended up kind of just chopping back down. I told you at that point, hey, like, I'm writing this off. I wouldn't have expected it to have made the run that it ended up making later on. Now, when it ends up reversing course and continuing to actually push back up here, just because I didn't think it was going to make that run at this point in time doesn't mean that if I turn back to it and I'm really watching it, if I'm able to find my levels and if I know where the big icebergs are, that doesn't mean that I'm definitely late to the trade, right? that doesn't mean that one is definitely late to the trade. I told you I didn't trade this stock. So personally, I didn't jump in just before we started Traders Talk. But if one was watching the stock at the time and they knew where their levels were, is it not possible for them to jump in? So it ended up spiking up. Well, just like I said at 334 here, the more times it needles this resistance, the same rules apply here. This was really rugged at first. This was a pain in the ass, pretty much, right? Trying to break over 350. Hey, I'm sure a couple of us got caught up on this trade when it broke 350 here on this green bar. If one had jumped in right there anticipating the run, I'd give you a grade A on the entry so long as you got in like right over 350, 351, 352. But the point is that when a stock breaks through a big level, we should be seeing a pretty big move shortly after. And if it doesn't make that big reaction that you want right away, odds are it's not going to make that big move, altogether. Otherwise, it's going to make a big move just, the complete opposite direction. So from there, easy to say, but once it pops above 350 and drops right back down under 350 on the same bar, run for the hills. Really. So over time, that's what happened repetitively over here. This was a pain in the ass, like I'd said. Well, the more times it needles its head on that resistance, it's going to make that big pop. So it took a little bit longer here where it popped up to it. It had one more shake. And on this bar, seemingly, once it popped it here, you could see a lot more buying came in. From there, that's what led to the move that you initially wanted to see from that level. Now, this ended up continuing to run as we started Traders Talk. So this is easy to go back on in hindsight, perhaps a lot easier to go back on in hindsight comparative to trading it in the moment. But let's see how this reacted afterwards, because although this broke over 350, well, there were still some other levels for the stock to follow, right? So before it re-broke 350 and ran, well, there was still one more iceberg that was out there, right? What line do you see that goes across the screen there on the top? At what price? It's like a 26,000 share order sitting there. And Pete says 360. Jim says 360. Yeah. So just what's interesting here, and I'll bring Bookmap back up. But when this pops and runs, notice this doesn't come back down to 350 at first. It ran all the way up towards 409, and then now it's really tanking. It's pulling back down pretty sharply here. Well, over time, it ended up building consolidation, not from 350, but from 360. So once it broke over 360, you wanted to see it make that big move shortly after, but that doesn't guarantee it's going to come back down here and hold 350 and run back up. 360 ended up becoming that support level once that broke as resistance, right? Now, otherwise, this ended up continuing to run. This is where level 4 gets tough to read, right here, because there's not really a clear, identifiable level as much now at this point. This looks a lot more staticky, a lot more tougher to read. So, you would assume a whole number like $4 would be a big level. You always should. And the more this pushes up, right? This is something we frequently talk about here in Traders Talk, or otherwise more so in the phase 2 curriculum. But it's to say that the more that any stock pushes up, the first time that it tests a major resistance, you should expect for it to fail. So that means here, when it ends up breaking out of this just chart resistance, it seems like 380 was just a strong chart level, if anything. I don't think there was any iceberg there. But once it popped that and continued, well, obviously it didn't continue much longer. But even from there, the first real test of 4, you would definitely look to sit on your hands, wait to see it prove itself out to be resistance. And then should it break that resistance cleanly, then you look to try and take it. So it was very choppy around that 4 level on one or two occasions. But obviously, the saying goes, right? When a stock breaks through a big level, you should be seeing a big move shortly after. So even if one had jumped in here and they're looking for that pop and run, this needs to explode off of 4 extremely quickly. Get a good reaction off it up towards, hey, I'm just shooting from the hip here with this price, but like, a 420, a 425, just get it off of that level. That's what you need to see. If you don't see that after you get in, especially at this time of the day, especially with how much the stock already, had moved up, well, again, I mean, I know it's easy to say after the fact, but in the moment, we need to be more cognizant of this because you don't want to get stuck holding on. Last thing you want to do is get stuck holding on to this disaster, right? All right, really quick. I had a question from YouTube that I want to answer right now. He's been waiting. So, from Gosu Trader, still joining us perhaps, he was asking, don't you use the VWAP? So, let me answer that actually first. And by doing that, let me bring Bookmap back up one more time. And for this, actually, this will be a lot easier to read. Just give me a quick sec. I'm going to just format my screen here so you could basically just only see the heat map or only see the VWAP. So the white line here goes to is the VWAP, the volume weighted average price. We absolutely factor in the VWAP, not all the time, but when it's holding and proving itself out to be a big level, that is where you need to focus on it as resistance, as an entry level, as an exit level. So this could be easy to say. But before this even broke over 350 here, is it possible for one to have gotten in, if not from the level I charted at 334? Well, the more times it needles and pops the VWAP here, you'd like to think there's a good chance it should react off it, right? That's easy to say in hindsight because to be transparent here, this was chopping around the VWAP as support and it broke under it. So, truth be told, right here, you'd give it a little bit more time to see it act as resistance. So, it's good that it popped it right away. That's confirmation for that, if not to be flipped as support, which it really wasn't. But otherwise, if it's not to be support after, then once it pops it here, then you definitely should be seeing that run, right? All right. So in the meantime, I do want to answer some questions from email. I'm going to go back to YouTube chat. I got a couple more questions from there that I see. But I had some emails that got sent in early this morning from students that are part of our curriculum and trading room right now. So I want to get to those here just in a bit. Um, well, this one actually we kind of just answered synonymously as we reviewed this SIDU. So, question from Bill, one of our members here, just basically asking on level 4. When you show the uh, bright orange lines of an order of an iceberg, are these lines only on level 4, or are they also on level 3? So that's the benefit of level 4. And by the way, level 4 is the nickname that we personally give Bookmap. That's our lingo. So, just with Bookmap, that is where you're able to see those dark red and orange lines. That's the benefit of that. It copies what the volume is on level 3 and paints it on the chart for you. So when an order gets added to the book and it's an iceberg, you'll see an orange or red line suddenly pop up. When an order gets pulled from the book, you'll see it suddenly disappear. So, that's just the main benefit of level 4. All right. Question from Janice in the chat board. I'm going to just move around here actually. So she just asked, when you enter the SIDU at 360, are you watching the stock on Bookmap all the time to make an exit order on level 4? Me personally, no. So again, just to reiterate, I personally did not trade the stock today. But if one were to have entered off of 360, they're most likely entering off of their platform. Yes, I believe through TradeStation, you could actually trade off of level 4 with your TradeStation account. I believe that's actually possible. I don't do that though. I don't touch that part of it. But otherwise, though, I just focus on my trading platform when I'm plugging my trades in. Uh, I mean, I got two eyes. They're fortunately not cross-eyed, so I'm able to kind of see things pretty straightforward, right? And that means that I can't focus on everything all over the place. And that's a joke, obviously. It's a crude joke to a degree, but it's to say that nonetheless, when I'm plugging my trades in, I can't focus anywhere else but my platform and my order bar, most importantly. Like, what if I'm like, looking at another screen and I'm going to press buy and I slip and my finger doesn't press it? Like I can't afford that, right? So if it's the question of when you enter the trade, are you watching the stock on Bookmap when you're actually pressing the buy button? No, I'm watching my platform, my level 2 screen, which has my order bar ultimately on it. Um, Now, the purpose of Bookmap is to identify these levels ahead of time and react off of it shortly after. So you need to know where the levels are first and then focus on your order bar, your execution, nonetheless, there. All right. All right. So, how about this? Got a question from Bruce, who had private chatted me as well this morning, just on this one. For Traders Talk today, wondering if anyone considered using a 3-minute chart instead of a 1-minute chart. I've been paper trading just using it. It does not seem as choppy, and it's easier for me to see bigger moves. Just curious, just as to your thoughts. That's the sole reason why I have a 5-minute chart, Bruce. That's really it. I have a 5-minute chart right up top here on the top left, and it's for that exact reason. It's a little bit easier to see the longer pattern across the intraday chart. It's a little bit easier to see chart patterns that are just simply longer drawn out. For instance, the more this kind of tops off here and the lows squeeze up, kind of looks like a Fausto flag that was building. Now that same pattern appears on the 1 minute. It's the same thing, but just the 5-minute chart consolidates it just a little bit more, right? A little bit better, easier to see, perhaps just otherwise what the stock did from the past trading day if we're, focused on that. Like for my Neo stock, obviously, which took a huge hit this morning, to my surprise. I was not expecting that as much. I expected the pullback at the open, but this thing just kept sinking. Jeez, there was like no opportunity for me to really sink my teeth into a short on this. Point being, though, just with the 5-minute chart, it gives you a good glimpse as to what the stock did over the last couple of trading days, right? So I use a 5-minute. If you use a 3-minute, then, hey, if you're comfortable with that, just all the more to you, right? As long as you're making money and following our strategy to a great level. And Bruce personally, I know, is, at least from when we last spoke, he seems like he has his head on his shoulders really well. And, he knows what to follow on level 3, level 4, and plots his levels pretty nicely. So, I was saying that, yeah, I mean, if there's something that anyone does that's slightly different from what I personally show, as long as you're following our strategy to its core and you're managing the trades the way that you should be, which ultimately risk management is part of our core strategy, right? But point being, if you're doing something just ever so slightly different, but you're following the real principles, I'm never going to be one to tell you to change habit, right? That would be silly. So that's all. Let's jump back to YouTube. How about this? Right back to you, Gosu. So from earlier, one of us on YouTube, Gosu Trader, is asking, can you check out the APLD trade? So APLD was like the level 1 stock from this morning that we ended up calling out. We had this on our pre-market watch list. I don't think Fausto put this on the main list at 9 o'clock with good reason. It was like crap. It was like very slow moving and just choppy. It was dropping off going into 8 o'clock. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't trade and call it out, though. So, of course, as soon as the markets opened, we ended up seeing this make a nice pop. And from there, our attention was on it rather quickly. So, let's just say if you had your eyes on this trade from pre market, and even though Fausto didn't put this on the main list, let's say if you're someone looking to follow more of a level 1 stock, something also more on the inexpensive side, well, this obviously fits the criteria. Let's just chart this stock to see what happens on level 3 and level 4. And we'll jump back to the chat because I know Gosu has a specific question here on this trade. So this is pre-market for the APLD trade. Where do we have a dark red line going across the screen? What do we think, folks? 147 says Bruce. 147 says Carol. Pete says 170. Focus on, again, just focus on what appears to be the darkest red orange line out there, and then look, and more, then from there focus on the number next to that price. So you could kind of see right here at, like, 147, there's about a 32,000 share order sitting there, right? 147, 150, of course, as well. 150 as a 50-cent level, that is assumed to be a big level. Well, that was there. That was there too. Now, if it breaks that and makes a strong pop off it, then we go to Pete's 169 here. That's the game plan initially. Now, aside from the red or orange lines that you may see, we have, at least for right now, a relatively large print. It's not 100+ thousand shares, but about 21,000 share buy print. Buy print got filled at 133. Okay, so what happens if this keeps breaking over 133? Well, it did right before the market opened, and we see the initial reaction, right? Give me a quick second. Just going to readjust my volume dots. It looks quite messy, so give me a quick moment. A lot better. All right, so by the time the market opens up, this ends up making a pretty strong run within the first 3 to 5 minutes to where it pops over 147, it pops over 150, but then obviously it shakes around quite a bit and then, dumps off, it flies back up. Let's pull this book map down here. Let's plot a couple of levels that we had just, mentioned a moment ago. We had mentioned 147. We had mentioned 150, right? Let's just focus on that to begin. So when the market opened, this definitely had a strong run at first, but the more times it just kind of shakes around and fails to really run higher off of, let's say, the highs there, whatever that is, 158, 157 eventually, if this is such a big level, it should be making a pretty big move shortly after, right? Now, if it holds over 147, mind you, there's still a possibility it could fly, but if it doesn't make that big move up, then don't, keep holding your breath waiting for that big move because it ends up breaking down, right? Now, obviously, in hindsight, this ended up popping and running. So, in terms of following our core strategy, we know where the levels are, right? We just, have them here at 147 and 150 as of now, unless if there's anything else that may pop up, but let's just keep it here. When it breaks under this as a support level, when it breaks under 147 as support and it drops off it, I would expect that to be resistance at first. I would not be interested in buying that right out the gate. And that's easy to say looking at what had happened shortly after, right? But that's just basic principles. That's like charting 101, support resistance 101. We talk about that in the phase one stock course all the time. Now, the more this can needle this resistance, then you should look to see the move, right? So APLD was on our pre-market list. I don't know if there was some news out on it. My assumption would be that there was, but either way, there was a lot of eyes on it, a lot of volume traded on the stock heading into the open. So at least off the initial run, it leads you to think, well, hey, when it ends up running like this, I know it ended up breaking down later on, but a trader's mind would lead you to think that there's always a possibility should the stock provide it for you. So, with that, this provided the chance to see this needle this resistance again at 147 and 150. The more it does that, given that when it ended up running above 147 and 150, we at least saw some buying interest at first at that price. Well, the more buying interest that we see at that price, we should get to see a pretty nice reaction off it. So this ended up ultimately leading to a nice pop off that level. But, and as we'll chart here coming up, our second level here, our third level, heat at 169. I know the high of the day was 67. Levels are not meant to hold perfectly, not levels are not meant to hit perfectly to the penny. So it is to say, early on in pre-market, we had that 169 order out there. It was for about 15K. Look at the other orders around it. That's pretty big in the grand scheme. Well, that ended up acting as, relatively speaking, the top on this trade, and it ended up failing to run back up there. If it's not going to run back up there, if it's not going to break any higher, again, I know it's just easy to say in hindsight, but it's just basics of charting and how a stock moves. If it's not going to break any higher, there's only one other way it's going to go in the temporary. So now at this point, this thing's cooked. It just broke back under 150. It's breaking under 147. These types of stocks are not going to look to make another big move up for us here heading into the afternoon. They much more often than not don't. So, if this does, God bless it, but I'm not going to have my eyes on this at least, after we finish up this review. So, I mean, hey, maybe over time, I mean, maybe this week by Friday, maybe next week, who knows? But that's not what we're looking for right now in this moment. That's all. Gosu says, yeah, yes, a long primarily the earlier and more frequently it needles over and under the VWAP, the stronger the move typically, since it's accumulating retail shorts, in my opinion. That's not a bad mindset. That's not a bad way to think about it. The way that I think about it in that sense is that that's very well a possibility, and not to necessarily say accumulate shorts, but accumulate longs dependent upon the move after, right? But with that, though, I don't pull my hair out about the intention as much as I focus on just the levels and the underlying philosophy. So there comes a point in time where I just lose interest in a trade for a little while because it's not making that big move shortly after it breaks through that big level. That's a very generic catchphrase, right? I want you to know that. But that's our underlying philosophy. That's what leads us to save our asses on trades. The more that we hold on to a stock that's not going anywhere, it's going to make a more erratic shakedown or even a full-fledged reversal. So, that's just what you need to be very mindful of just in that sense. How about this for the APLD? Let me bring the VWAP up for this trade just to kind of see how it looked like on this. So it broke over it here initially, right? You'd anticipate resistance to be support. So this could be a pretty interesting setup right here where it retraces to the VWAP under and over. Nice entry if you're looking for the run right here, but obviously it doesn't give it to you at first. So that's where you need to just realize if it's not going to make that big move up at first, it's more likely to crash. But then, hey, this lines up really well with 147, 150, the volume based levels that we had from pre-market. So this lines up really well for a nice pop. All right, so let's see what else we got from email here. We got a bunch of other questions coming in from the chat, from email, and I mean from the trading room here. So from Rosina asking, what key points do you see that a stock is ready to break out? That, unfortunately, is a question that requires a very lengthy answer, and that is something that we take a lot of time to cover live this week in the Phase 2 curriculum. So, we started off just yesterday covering the Level 3 program again. We introduced Level 4 in that class. We'll cover that, tomorrow, but I need a lot more time than what I have remaining here to really answer that. I hope I answered that, Rosina. That was sent in from 11:35 Eastern time about 9 minutes ago. So I'd covered a couple of things there just recently on the APLD, the SIDU. Let me jump to one trade here that I wanted to go over for you folks. And from there, we'll just jump back to emails and then just YouTube chat at the end. But the STIM, man, I was hopeful for a nice run on this trade this morning. I mean, news came out on this stock. I think it's a pharma, but ended up having a nice pop initially. It pulled back going into the 8 o'clock move. It started to make a nice bounce from there, though, right? And going into 9 o'clock, it was looking pretty stable. Now it had dropped off here before the market was opening up, right? So at least leading into the market open, the way this looks is that it seems like it's only going to drop off more, right? Seems like it. I mean, looking at the drop going into 8 o'clock, the rounded top that it made seemingly at 9, pulled back. We just talked about this yesterday in the Phase 2 course. This stock, surprisingly for my platform at least, is easy to borrow. The stock is shortable. So, what if this fails to make a big pop and run? What if this fails to really go? Well, the stock is tradable on the other way around, right? On the way down. So, what I want to do briefly, let's see if I could do this in time. Um, I want to copy and paste the levels that I ended up charting for this exact stock. So, I'm just going to do that here. This is the STIM. Now, keep in mind that there's a lot of lines on this chart that I'm showing you right now, so it could be quite confusing. A lot of different colors, a lot of different lines. I have a trend line here even as well. Delete that here to start. But it's to say that these are all levels that I plotted from the naked chart here, just chart levels in purple. Just chart levels from the past couple of days, from the past month or so, from the daily. I respect that. But then obviously I look at Bookmap and I plot those levels onto my chart here. So to go back to like Janice's question of like when you enter the trade, are you looking at Bookmap to do that? Or are you like plugging it in, like, or are you entering, or are you watching it from your platform? I have to identify the levels first, right? So even for stocks that I don't have the time to chart as well as I do here in pre-market, well, I have to identify those levels first, but then I'm watching my platform. That's where I'm pressing buy and sell and short. So I can't look elsewhere and mess up, right? So I just want to reiterate that by the time the market opened up on this trade, this essentially just false broke over the 450 level and then came back down, right? The more times this ended up needling my support level at 425, I would anticipate that we're going to see a drop. We're going to see the stock, really tank. The more times it comes down and breaks under 425. So essentially, that's what happened on this trade, to where it broke under 425. I actually took this trade from 427, which I normally don't do. I normally don't take a trade right above my line, but I ended up noting a level that was being built beforehand. So I wanted to show you that here. Let me just bring up Bookmap briefly. Told you I missed out on SIDU this morning, but I ended up getting my hands on STIM as a short. So essentially, we had an iceberg at 425 on the bid, 28 plus thousand share order on the bid sitting there. Well, it's to say that this trade ended up, or this order ended up getting pulled before the market opened, right? So although that order is not technically there, I'm still going to respect that as a level. And you can clearly see this stock still respected 425 as a support level, as it initially came down there and held pretty much right above it, broke under it here at first, but held after. See where my cursor is, folks, for all of us here? Just right where my cursor is on the far right side, where it says CVP Delta. There's like a larger green bar there. So I ended up catching this as it was beginning to pull down, and it was pulling down under that price. So essentially right here, I made the assumption to say, unless if this spikes back above like 429, 430, this is likely to, just pin under this order here, under this level, and just continue to drop. So I ended up going for the short right from 427, just with seeing kind of this resistance being built from the amount of volume from the ask getting filled there. Well, it led to a nice jump, or a nice drop, I should say. So I ended up getting out on this trade. It was right off of 410, 409, 410. I guess I could have held on a slight bit longer, but all in all, just it ended up coming down to my next set of levels. So I'm not going to risk it. I mean, this stock was coming off of some sort of good news. I was initially looking for a pop and a run on it, but if that doesn't happen, with this stock being shortable, at least, hey, why not? If this can, break under a big level on the way down, then by all means, I'll look to take that trade. So it led to a nice short. I got out at 410 and, continued a little bit more after, but I'm not in the interest in the art of holding on to a trade for a long period of time on the intraday. A swing trade's a swing trade, a day trade's a day trade. I don't really like taking my day trades for like an hour, 2 hours time. So, I know the more I do that, it's more likely to, reverse move back up here. All right, folks, let me just jump back to email. Let me jump back to the live trading room here, see if there's other questions that are coming in from the chat there. Question from Ava asking just very quickly, how do you get level 3 and level 4 data on her computer? So, with that level 3, there's a couple of ways that you can acquire it. First, it's dependent upon what platform that you have. So, if you're on TradeStation, they have level 3, quote unquote. They don't call it level 3. That's a nickname that we give it for their data. But we'll teach you in our classes how to get the level 3 from TradeStation, which data packages that you would like to subscribe to. Interactive Brokers is another platform that has quote unquote level 3 data. Thinkorswim is a broker or platform that has level 4. They actually have Bookmap integrated onto the platform. So if you have Thinkorswim, it would be something worth inquiring about to Thinkorswim. Ask about Bookmap. Don't call it level 4 to them. That's again our lingo for it. But otherwise, just ask about Bookmap, and they'll be able to add that data on for you. It's about $40 a month. John says, love the service on Thinkorswim. Yeah, Bookmap's a great add-on for the Thinkorswim platform there. Makes them a much better day trading platform, to be honest. They were never really the best day trading platform, just more with options and charting, if anything. Question from Bill in the chat board as I'm just looking at it here. He's asking when to sell. Do you use? Do I happen to use trailing stops, or how many cents drop do I sell at? So personally, I don't use trailing stops. To each their own on that, though. Love-hate relationship from a few of our students with it, just because it provides a great security blanket, but it takes them out of trades oftentimes too early. Uh, but if you know how to manage the trailing stop and set it based on the volatility of the stock you're trading, then in that sense, if as long as you're using it well and you're consistently making money, again, like I just told Bruce earlier about the 3-minute chart, I'd never be one to tell you to change successful habits. But with that though, generally, no, I don't use trailing stops. I also don't use OCO or bracket orders. How many cents drop do I sell at? That's dependent upon the stock, and that's a very ambiguous answer to give. I know that, and I know that doesn't help as much initially. But it's to say that every stock presents its own unique levels, its own unique scenario. So for STIM, like I'd said here, hey, how about this? On the flip side, I'll tell you about a losing trade I took just on this one earlier. So I was looking for a move back up on this trade, and it started to here. As we were starting traders talk, I don't know if I would be in this trade at this point now because it's taking its sweet time. Like I told you, I'm not in the art of doing that really. But the more times it needles this as resistance, I'm thinking that there's a chance. So I jumped in long from 411. All right. Well, this is a pretty big level. It's a big chart level. This was actually, I believe, the high from the last 3 days. 408, 409, 408. That seems like a pretty strong top to me, right? Pretty big level to me. And I know that when a stock breaks through a big level, we should be seeing a big move shortly after. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. Did this move up after? Yeah, but it took its sweet time though, right? It's not worth it. So I ended up getting stopped out on this trade right at 408. I took a 3-cent loss. I played it to my level. I played it to 409, but if it's not going to run off there and make the move I want it to make, may as well just get out. Now you might sit there and say, well, why didn't you just get out before it broke under your level? Well, that's easy to say in hindsight, right? That's pretty easy to say in hindsight. You got to play to your level. So, like over here, it's to say by the time this breaks under then back over 425, I didn't take this trade. But if I were to have, I would likely set my stop at worst under 420. I assumed that 420 was going to be a bit of a level to complement 425, which looks bigger, thicker line. So, if I jumped in here, then I'd be looking for a pretty big move back up. But if it breaks under this level, then by all means, I'd be out. So it's to say that I play to my levels, but if there's not really a big level for a period of time, or that's not the right phrase, if there's not really a big level for a little while below where you're trading the stock at, don't hold on. That doesn't mean to hold on to that level, right? When a stock breaks through a big level, Again, very generic, redundant catchphrase that you're getting here, but you should be getting a big move shortly after. Any brokerages in Canada providing level 3 and level 4, not level 4, but level 3 interactive brokers based in Canada. They have data from their program called the Book Trader. Again, though, they don't call it level 3. That's our nickname for it. So just ask them about the Book Trader program that they have. It's on their platform. They'll know exactly what you're talking about with that. All right, folks, let me just sift through my email inbox one more time. A little dead radio here for us for right now. My apologies. Just going through my inbox, just checking to see if there's any other last questions I didn't have a chance to cover here. Let me check my spam or junk. That sometimes happens. Nope, we're all good. Perfect. I'll tell you what, this pretty much wraps up right around with the 12 o'clock time slot anyway. So, for all of us on YouTube today exclusively, we normally don't do this workshop for you folks here. We do this live inside our trading room every Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern time. If you're interested in continuing along, whether it be for this week or next, just to join our live trading room, just go right down to the link on the blue banner below the stream right there to get started. But we're not done just yet. I'm just going to ask right now, folks, for Brian, for Rosina, Janice, John, for Pete, for Carol, for all of us just here in the trading room. Any last questions they have? Any last questions for me, just in general? I might not be able to answer it with the time I have, right? If it's a more a more generic question of like entries and exits. But if it's a specific trade, I think that we have a little bit more time. And if it's a question about an iceberg order or level 3, level 4, just let me know. Let me jump back to that APLD trade. APLD not going anywhere right now. I'd be pretty careful should that break under 147 again. Bill asking, how did Neo fake you out today? That's a very good question. That's a great question. So Neo faked me out today because, well, the direction of this stock leading into the market open was very well upward. So for me, I'm thinking when a stock breaks resistance and it runs off it, all right, well, resistance should be support. And not even to say that, but it's just to say otherwise, well, the stock was trending up pretty nicely leading into the open. Even if it does shake down and break a little bit, I'm expecting to catch a bounce. Like I have a couple of different levels that I charted for Neo. So with that, when Neo opened up and got its ass kicked and broke under 21, broke under 2084 here, I ended up taking my long trade right at 2072. Great entry, I thought. I thought it was a pretty slick entry, but it wasn't the right move, obviously, because this clearly ended up coming right back down. It broke right back under 2072. I took a 1 cent loss. I call it break even. Listen, -1, +1, can care less about those. Unless if you're stacking 70 to 80 of those a day up, I'd say that the -1s, +1s, I call those break evens, a break even trade. But after it broke down and continued to drop, Bill, I just didn't look for the short. I was looking more for the long. I didn't long it from that point up until 20, it was like 1990 to 20 as it was squeezing back up a little bit here. But otherwise, just this was a nasty trade on the way down that I just wasn't expecting. I was expecting a bounce here, didn't get it. Took a great loss in the grand scheme, but just I was a lot more hesitant to short this trade because I was looking for the long. So once it rebroke under 2050, it's easy to say, but that would have made for a great short trade, right? Just I wasn't expecting the continuation. Hate when that happens. Bill asking, what parameters do you sort to find stocks to trade? That's largely based initially off of the percent gainers and percent losers lists. That's for Bill C. So Bill I just before Bill C now. So the percent gainers and losers lists here are what we used to start the morning off with. But from there, though, just personally speaking, I have other scans that I have from TradeStation, just that I'll run throughout the day. Not really as much that, really as much as it is Benzinga. Benzinga Pro, it's a paid program that I use and I run, and it's just very good for live data. How do I best say? Um, it's a live feed basically of just stocks that are breaking highs and lows throughout the day. So this is basically what I'm working off of right now. Over the last 5 minutes, AREC has moved up 1%. There is not much here that seems to be making a strong move upward right now at this time. I'm just telling you. So that's pretty much what I do personally there, Bill C. But in class, though, we teach you how to scan in pre-market. Without that, we'll teach you how to scan using the percent gainers and losers lists at first. You could easily build up your own watch lists off a regular scan like I show here. We'll show that in class coming up in August for the Phase 1 stock course. All right, folks, got to jump on to a couple of coaching calls throughout my day right now. For all of us on YouTube, again, if you wanted to join us inside our live trading room, just go right down to the link on the blue banner below to get yourself started. But otherwise, though, if you have any questions beforehand that you'd want to send over my way via email, feel more than free to do so. Josh@ctutrading.com is my email. I always like to post it at the end of the afternoon meeting streams I do. So even furthermore here, coming off this exclusive Trader Stock workshop for all of us live inside the trading room. You folks got me all day. So even though I'm jumping onto a coaching call right now or a couple throughout the afternoon, just private chat me. You folks can have direct chat to me throughout the day inside the live trading room. Send over a private chat to me on the side. It's extremely easy for me to write back to you just right then, right there. All right, folks, for all of us inside the trading room, I'll be back on the mic, though, just later on this afternoon at 2:30 Eastern time. I'll talk to you then. Take care.
Become a CyberGroup member today. Just click the link below and receive all these amazing products and a world